This topic goes dear to my heart, cost-aware product decisions and shifting lefter. I was the co-author on one of the Insights article on involving FinOps teams early on in the product stage. So as JR mentioned in the keynote this morning as well, it becomes up more and more as a central topic within FinOps practices and how to get involved earlier on in product decisions and also within the software lifecycle. So we thought it would be a great opportunity to actually hear from experts in the industry how they're looking at cost-aware product decisions and shifting lefter. So that's why we've organized this panel of experts led by Richard from Adobe. So please welcome on stage Richard, Rick, Liz, Michael, and Alfonso to discuss about cost-aware product decisions.
Thank you all for joining us. I'm very excited. We've got a special session here. It's very rare that we get to have all four of these companies represented on one stage, and when we do, I think there's always something to be learned. So I'll give you a brief introduction of myself. My name is Richard Steck. As it says here, I work at Adobe, and I run our public cloud, private cloud, a lot of our data governance, global networking, and one of the teams that I have the pleasure to work with is our FinOps practice. I just want to tell you briefly a little bit about that, and then we'll go down the line. There's really four key components of Adobe's cloud financial management program. We've got the cloud provider management team that's really responsible for making sure that we get all that we need from our suppliers. That includes roadmaps, any kind of incidents or remediation, discounts, the pricing. We've got a cloud architecture group that focuses very heavily on what are those best practices that help shape a lot of the policy that we implement. We have a centralized cloud automation and governance team that's really responsible for making sure that whether it's a security policy or a financial policy, that's all secured and set up for everybody centrally. And then last, we actually have a cloud consulting team that's internal that actually signs statements of work with our product engineering groups to help them unblock anything that is stuck. So if we see a savings opportunity that they just can't get to, we'll actually embed our team with them for a period of time and with a promise of what they're going to deliver and what we're going to deliver. So that's a brief note about that. That's the central team. Every product group has their own dedicated FinOps practice as well that works with us to make sure that they're doing what they think is best for their individual product team. So I'll turn the time over to Lisa to introduce herself.
Thanks, Richard. I lead a product strategy team for Oracle. My product portfolio includes our external customer-facing cost management and FinOps tools, but also what we use internally to lead FinOps. My colleague is here at the conference as well and leads it across Oracle. One of the things that makes it unique is that we support the entire company. I sit in the infrastructure organization, but our SaaS applications run on our infrastructure. So when we're looking at these optimization decisions, it's across our company, and we'll talk about that more in the panel.
Hi, I'm Michael Flanakin. I drive a lot of the FinOps solutions and alignment across Microsoft to just really bring everybody, get everybody on the same page across the different product teams and services teams that we have across the company, just to make sure we're all kind of speaking the same language. I'm also on the TAC with Rick here. I'm also on the Focus Steering Committee and very heavily involved in the Focus effort. There's a lot of great stuff going on there.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rick Ochs. I lead product management at AWS for all of the optimization tooling. That includes Compute Optimizer, savings plans recommendations, savings plan purchase console, RI recommendations, and like anything that you generally get a recommendation for is probably coming from my tool stack.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Alfonso. I'm a senior product manager at Google, and I oversee, where I'm head of optimization within the cloud billing tooling. That includes FinOps Hub, all the CAD recommendations, and optimization in general.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the introductions, and it's great to see such a diverse scope even within just how do we do FinOps tooling. So as mentioned in the introduction, we're here to talk a little bit about how do we make more FinOps-aware decisions sooner in the process. I think JR's intro this morning was a very good one. How do we bring more of that decisioning forward in that process? It's not something that's easy. It's not something that's totally mature, which is why I'm excited that we get to kind of explore the art of what's possible here. So Just to open it up and something for everyone here, Lisa, we'll start with you. But Rick, can you share some examples, either within your team, within your company, or something that you've seen externally where you've seen teams shift left in that decisioning on how to be more FinOps aware earlier in that process?
Yeah, I mean, we as a company, we're a large customer of our own infrastructure. We build our SaaS applications, like I mentioned, on our infrastructure. So one of the things I've seen is the uptake of, from an efficiency perspective. I don't know that necessarily every line of business is driven by the cost, but there's definitely an efficiency motivation. And we're using specific internal cost mechanisms, price, if you will, but it's an internal cross charge, to incent specific behaviors and drive specific patterns within the company. So we're really trying to learn from ourselves how to build better products and tools for our external customers.
I love that, and I see that within Adobe as well. Like, there's a whole variety of, not only do individual teams have their own level of maturity, but I think that we see that each product is in a different phase. Some products have been around at Adobe for 20 plus years, and some have been around for 20 weeks. And so where they are on that journey is also very different. Awesome.
Yeah, and it makes them think differently about how they build their application stack.
Yeah, and I think that internal cross-training is again, that's something that we echo and really lean on. How do we bring those best practices forward? That's great, thank you. Michael.
Yeah, so at Microsoft, Microsoft is a huge company, and we have so many different teams that are kind of doing things in their own ways. Different organizations are kind of driven by the different leaders, and they bring their own flavor into what they do. It's often funny when people come join Microsoft, they're like, okay, Microsoft has a way that they do everything. And it's like, no, really each team is kind of doing their own thing to a certain degree. So it's interesting seeing kind of the breadth of just different ways that we'll see this type of, the whole shift left conversation work in the different organizations, as some leaders are more hands-on, some are more detail-oriented, thinking about those sorts of things. But I think the biggest thing that I would say that we do is we really make sure that the budgeting and forecasting is a big part of just how we approach everything, and having that broken down at the finest level. So we're obviously running everything out of Azure. Each team has a series of subscriptions that they're using for each of the individual solutions that they have. And we track our budgets down at that level, right? And we're doing our forecasting at that level. So that way people can have a continual look at where they're heading and be able to project that out, aggregate that up for leaders at different levels, because we also roll that up in, I think, 4 different ways, depending on if we're doing it by service or the people hierarchy, and being able to tell the right story for the right leaders is super important.
That's great. Yeah, we've definitely seen the same thing. The way that finance sometimes wants to look at the cost center hierarchy is maybe different than somebody wants to look at the org hierarchy.
Yeah.
There are some leaders that say, just show me everything within my scope.
Yep.
There are some that say, within my reporting structure. Some want to see everything within their cost hierarchy. So yeah, a lot of different ways to slice that. It's great. Yep. Rick.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about an example of how we're doing that with Compute Optimizer and savings plans recommendations. When we look at recommendations and how we work on them, as we're building new recommendation types, we're taking a look at the unit metrics for recommendations. For us, that's like cost per recommendation to deliver. And that's really because my team likes to launch free features. It's a lot of fun, and it's easier for us to do that if we have a strong understanding of the cost structure of building a new recommendation type for our customers. And that gives us more leeway to launch more free things, right? And so as we're engineering recommendation types, we take a look at the unit cost by 2 pizza teams. And Amazon has this engineering practice where we have small engineering teams that are no bigger than 2 pizzas can feed. That's kind of the origin of the statement. But each team looks at the cost for their component of an overall application or a feature. And we aggregate the costs for each of the 2 pizza teams for a new feature, and then take a look at that total cost for a new feature and divide it by the unit metric to take a look at, hey, are we improving our cost structure with this launch? Can we continually drive that number down while still providing more value for customers? And that allows us to really understand, as part of the engineering practice, how much more can we deliver? How much more runway do we have? And by asking our engineers to come to the table with the cost metrics for each component they build, they're thinking about it because they know what our unit metric is. And so as they're building it, it leads them down a path of picking services and architectures that more closely align to the unit metric. So for example, instead of using maybe EC2 instances, which are more of a flat fixed cost, they might use something more like S3 or Glue services, which the cost follows the scale of the application. So if a ton of customers are using a feature, the cost will scale with the customer value, and the unit metric may not change a whole lot, and we deliver the same amount of value per recommendation, as opposed to if we used resources that were fixed provisioned, like static EC2 instances, we have like a fixed cost that doesn't really go down if there's less value or less usage of a product or feature. And so that allows us to pick use architectural decisions and services that allow us to serve a better total cost for a unit metric, right?
Yeah, I love that. That's you mentioned that the first time that we spoke, and I've been thinking about it ever since. About if you use something like a virtual machine, that's a fixed cost, right? Even if it's at 10% or 100% utilization. Whereas if you're using more of those services that are really pay for what you use, that's like the ultimate promise of the cloud. You have a better forecasting around that. The other thing I really thought was interesting with your audience, the scope of who's your customer, typically those are people that are already an AWS customer. So you kind of have a maximum number of user base, right? Like even if it goes viral, you've got a cap as to what that looks like. And so that's really helpful for the forecasting for you and your team.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's great. And Alfonso.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rick. I would like to just provide the perspective of how at Google we take some of these cost implications earlier in the process. And I think it boils down to three things. One is accountability for non-technical requirements. Second is about automation. And third is about processes and culture. So as you are aware, the product discipline is all about understanding the customer needs, working with the user, and breaking down those into the critical user journeys, the jobs to be done, and ultimately into a PRD. But we engage very closely with engineering. We partner with engineering to make sure they are accountable for the non-technical requirements. So they are the ones driving those, whether it's compliance, because we have billing data, security, whatever comes by default, or expectations for any solution in Google Cloud, whether it's data location, data processing, latency, and so on, that's on engineering. And then whenever they take that into account before they even design the solution, they quantify the computing power they will need, but they don't get to choose the machine instances. Basically, they just set up computing needs and start developing on top of a cluster management platform that we built that allows them to scale up, manage the scaling up and down vertically and horizontally with basically no human intervention. Whether the usage patterns are changing on a rapid pattern, the system will scale up. And then it looks at the long-term traffic as well, and perhaps the solution is growing organically, and it will nudge the engineers to change the configuration so they can react to those things, whether it's going up or perhaps it's going down. And finally, any solution that we build, we focus very strongly in site reliability engineering, which is a discipline that Google invented. And we make sure that every process and every task that requires constant human repetition is automated. So that basically ensures that we have a low cost of ownership of the solutions we build.
Yeah, that's great. I have two books that are always on my desk. It's the FinOps book, of course, and the Google SRE book. So
okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
Definitely appreciate that. And you know, whether that was on purpose or not, I think that's been a fundamental thing from Google in the beginning of that platform, right? That the engineering teams, like the cost and the decisioning, a lot of that, those variables have been removed for a lot of your developers. I think for a lot of us maybe in the room, right? It's anything under the sun is still possible. So it's an interesting use case that you have within Google there. Yeah, great, awesome. So if you didn't pick up, the product management strength here is strong. For me in the Adobe journey, FinOps really started with, engineers. We started to get a couple people from finance that were more concerned about costs that were outpacing the growth of the business. And that's really kind of the formation. As I think about product management and how do we get some of these things to be on that list of requirements, most of the product managers that I talk to are super excited about that customer focus, focusing on what they need, the features. Sometimes, whether it's security or financial efficiency, that's less appealing for some people. As product managers, you're in an interesting place. And again, I think you're all extremely mature in this practice. But what are some thoughts that you have as a product manager on how can you help others to consider and weigh the value of these decisions sooner in that process?
Yeah, so I can speak from both my current experience leading a team of product managers, but also other experiences that I've had that don't necessarily represent the way we do things at Oracle or at OCI. I would say that we're very engineering driven. So our cost accountability is owned by very senior engineering executives. It's not that product managers don't need to understand the profitability of their product, but I think similar to some of the other panelists, all of our cost and optimization tools are free of charge. So it's not necessarily a front and center thing for our product managers. We're a lot more motivated by things like adoption of the tool. That's a more central metric for us. But I've seen on smaller teams and products where there is a charge to the customer, I've seen product managers have a need to be a lot more cost aware of what it costs to build their service.
Great. Awesome. Michael?
So when I think about this, like the recommendations that I would have for people, I think one of the most important things is making sure that you've got the right tools to support this shift left conversation, because it aligns with everything that we talk about within FinOps, because there's this cultural aspect that you need to change to get people to start thinking about it sooner. But there's also having the right tools to facilitate that conversation. And I don't want to overly pander, but there's things like having tooling outside the portal that will support people where they're at. So like the business conversations, the finance conversations, you need tooling that's going to support them and bring those things earlier in that process. So things like Microsoft Fabric, there's things like Copilot, which can help facilitate that. And also doing that using a language that they understand. And I'll bring in focus here as well, because one of the biggest challenges that we have is that each of these different players today, unfortunately, have a different set of terminology that they're used to, right? And that's one of the great things with Focus. Focus is like this new language of FinOps that we can then align everybody to that same common terminology. You have that pipe through all the way into the tools that engineers are using, the reports that leadership is seeing. So really just have the right tools to help facilitate those conversations is kind of what I would say.
Yeah, I think that's great, right? What's the definition of success? And if you don't have the right tools and the data and the transparency to even know if what you're setting out to do works. That's great. Rick, I know you've got some thoughts on this.
I had a practitioner ask me the same question at lunch today, like out on the deck, and it just made me think more about, like, they phrased the question as like, when is the right place to optimize? Is it like after everything's built, or is it before? Ideally it's before, but maybe that's a bit of a unicorn situation. Like, how do you optimize something that doesn't exist yet, right? And I think that I've had this experience with many customers where they're like, oh, we don't have a cost problem. And I'm like, all right, well, I'll talk to you next year,
Sounds like they have a telemetry problem.
Yeah, and they might not feel like they have this problem until they've built something, it's been running for a while, and then they can go back and look at it and say, okay, did we pick the right instance sizes and things like that? So I think that it's this evolution where they have to experience a little bit of that pain and then innovate on how they do their process, and ideally it moves left over time. because optimization does tend to be sort of a after-the-fact cleanup activity for a lot of organizations, and that's not like a great run state long-term for us. As a FinOps industry, as all of us, right? Like, we definitely want to go earlier on in the engineering cycle. But in order to do that, right, we need to be getting to unit economics. We need to be getting to understanding architecture and its impact on cost to serve, you know. And again, like, back to how AWS is doing it, like, we really are trying to make our engineers explain the cost structure of the components they build as part of a launch cycle. And that's really helpful, because if the engineers can see the impact of their designs on the total cost to serve a customer, right, they can start thinking about that when they're writing their code. And so I guess my answer overall is yes, we want to shift left, but don't, you know, perfect is the enemy of the good. Any optimization is good optimization. Start wherever you can. Wherever you have buy-in and leadership support to optimize, go do that. And that will allow you to mature over time and move more left over time.
Yeah, I like that. We at Adobe often talk about premature optimization and trying to balance that, because sometimes we think we know how a product is going to be used, and the users surprise us, right? They actually glom onto a feature that we didn't think was going to be the most popular, but ends up being something that's really interesting. And so, you know, if we had tried to optimize what we thought without actual feedback from the market, sometimes we run into those situations. And so I really like what you said about kind of balancing that. It should not be zero in the beginning, right? But does it need to be perfect? I think that that's always, if it was perfectly secure, perfectly efficient, right, it might not ever launch. So, great. And Alfonso.
Yeah, I think most of the answer was already provided, but I will say that I see the industry continues to make progress. Like 3 years ago, when I started talking to customers about optimization, similar to what Rick said, like, oh, recommendations, like, no, we don't need them. Like, adoption was pretty much null. So things are progressing, and any optimization is a good optimization. I will say that the common pitfalls that we continue to see is that cost is not, in some cases, not being considered at the beginning of the process. So as much as you can to move that left, as the panel implies, is a good thing. I will say the other thing that I would suggest is that we use the, again, it has been mentioned, but the cloud native technology, so you can easily scale down if need be. As grow continues, you can scale up. But more than that, all the services and all the capabilities that the cloud provides, observability, like there's a lot of richness in the utilization metric, cloud logging, those kinds of things. The recommendations that come native from every CSP, like there's a lot of richness in there. So use those capabilities and benefit from them.
Yeah, I won't give away anything proprietary here, but at Adobe generally, I think we've seen a trend, what I would say is up the stack, right? That the basic units of compute, storage, network, whatever, are starting to give way to more of those cloud native services and functionality, which are really insightful for us. So it's a great way for our teams to be able to see, you know, like how can we move more quickly by using some of those things where we thread them together. Right. I had an opportunity to sit down with the team, and you know, they were using a serverless function, popped onto a message queue, popped onto a managed database, and then back onto a message queue. And it's just, you know, there was no compute in that entire process, right? So very quick, very lightweight, and very easy to understand the cost of that.
Yeah, exactly. Those kinds of things are, like, as you move up in the stack, it's easier to change and start optimizing, as opposed to the example you were giving with the VM.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you. So we talked a little bit, and there were a couple of examples that I thought were pretty insightful on, there are some things that, you know, like what are people getting wrong in their decisioning when they're thinking about this? Rick and Lisa, you both had some thoughts on this. Do you want to start, Rick?
Yeah, I think, like, let's talk about right sizing. Like, a lot of customers are like, oh, we have a lot of cost pressure. We need help saving money. And then they look at right-sizing recommendations, and, you know, like the survey data has indicated for many years, getting engineers to take action is very difficult, right? And continually kind of saying, well, that's not for us, or we can't do that because, and like we've all improved our right-sizing algorithms a lot over the last few years. They're in pretty good shape, you know. There's, from a technical perspective, there's the number of reasons why they may not work for you has dwindled pretty rapidly, and really driving engineers to think about how you operate efficiently over time, and like let's not just gloss over these recommendations and say we can't take them. But it takes some guts, right? To this idea that you're going to change an instance size, you're going to have to reboot this instance and take some downtime for it. It's risky, right? And people generally don't want to do that. They don't want to take that risk. And we need to encourage bravery. We need to encourage transparency in the data on how we generate recommendations. We need to help engineering teams maybe build trust in the tools and the recommendation algorithms to the point where they feel like they can serve their purpose in their business. One of the things that I would really like for us as an industry to move towards is to celebrate when engineers are taking recommendations and the savings amount. I've seen organizations that do like savings newsletters, and they celebrate engineers that take recommendations and save a certain amount of money. And when you highlight the heroes that are showing the character traits and like the customer obsession and the company obsession about being responsible with resources, and you kind of show what good culture looks like, you can really drive change. And recommendations is definitely one of those areas where customers are like, we need savings, and we show savings, and they're like, well, not that savings. And I'm like, okay, let's work together. Let's get this industry, the optimization and the FinOps industry, down the road. What can we do together to increase trust? These recommendations are here for you. We build them for you. We work with you to make sure they're super accurate and applicable to your use cases. So let's as an industry take that next step forward about making this common.
Yeah, I've seen that, and it's amazing what that senior leadership support will do. The Adobe campaign team was on the stage a little bit earlier talking about their success, and I've seen firsthand their executive leadership celebrate those successes of saving money. And it's a change, right? We've got the SRE book that talks all about reliability, right? And to lower the amount of overhead that you have to the level that's maybe one right below where you need it to be to save money, right? Like there's some risk there for people that are used to running highly available systems. And if something spikes really quickly, how do I respond to that? And it takes some executive leadership and air cover to really give the teams permission to say, hey, if we have an outage because you are running too lean, right? How are we going to deal with that? And so celebrating success.
But there's another point too, though. But the interaction between commitments and right sizing, where another mistake that I see sometimes is people are afraid to make their commitments because they want to right size first, or they're afraid to right size because they've made commitments. And really understanding the relationship between commitments and resource management together, right? And we've tried really hard to do that with like Hub, something we launched earlier this year is like, or late last year, is we want these to be kind of the same thing where you're thinking about commitment management and resource management at the same time. Because you don't do every single right size recommendation all on the same day and then therefore buy a commitment. That's not realistic. So you should mix and match and slowly build up your commitments and do your right sizing at the same time. And it's not one or the other, it's both together.
Yeah, we've almost thought of some of that as almost like, the twice a month mortgage payments, right? If we can make those commitments on a very regular basis, we actually give ourselves more flexibility to make some smaller decisions and adjustments as some of those reservations
That's
expire.
A great example.
So, yeah.
It's free money, right?
It is free money, yeah. Lisa, did you have anything?
Yeah, I'm going to come at it from more of a business angle. So a big eye-opener for us is that in order to tell the story of the cost savings, it's not just about the data that's generated in the cloud or the infrastructure data, so it's how we merge that data with other data sets like a people hierarchy or any kind of reporting structure that would be necessary for leadership. We're a very large corporation. And not every business unit operates the same way, so I think a common mistake is data hygiene. And I also think that a common mistake is not necessarily knowing what good looks like and working backwards from an outcome. So as a product manager, back to the previous question, I think what's really important is what outcome are you trying to drive? Are you trying to change behavior? Are you trying to say, like, what is the motivator for the change that you're trying to drive? And to work backwards from that outcome, because if you can rally everybody around the same outcome, you're more likely to have success.
I love it. I think we're hearing a common recurring theme of organizational buy-in. And I was talking with JR a little bit earlier today and talking about how do we continue to take these ideas and push them up the stack, right? We're all here. Like hopefully we're believers, but there's a lot of other people that we still need to get to subscribe to that. So we also talked a little bit in preparing for this session about what are some other non-financial motivators that you've seen that help consider, pay dividends in bringing some of this decisioning forward in that, looking at some of the FinOps practices. Alfonso, we'll start with you.
Okay, absolutely. So what we see internally, I think engineers by nature are motivated to solving complex challenges. And at Google, we basically empower our engineering managers to see the end-to-end costs, but not with monetary values, because those doesn't translate very well in the reality. They may be exorbitant numbers. So we use a metric, software engineering hours. It tends to resonate very well with them because they are day in and day out estimating software projects, and they do it in software engineering hours, so they can use that metric to figure out what the potential savings will be for a cost optimization. They use that to benchmark across different business units, across different applications, their opportunities they have, and the optimizations they are making. So we have, I know it's not an industry standard metric, but we have found that that's a very good motivator for our engineering team to do the right thing.
Yeah, I think Google's always done a great job of highlighting things like toil, right, and things that resonate with, like there's maintenance style work and there's new creative work, and a lot of engineers are really motivated by, I want to create that new customer value. Like they want to build things that get used, right, and making sure that they've got the time and resources to focus on those higher order problems is what I've seen motivates most people. So that's great. Michael, you've got some thoughts on this as well?
Yeah. This reminds me of a lot of the conversations that I have with both inside of Microsoft and with customers outside of Microsoft around how FinOps is more than just cost, right? Earlier this year we explicitly expanded the FinOps framework to explicitly cover carbon optimization and carbon measurement. I think that's a big thing that I have to keep reminding people. It's a bit unfortunate. The name FinOps has this fundamental financial association that people just assume. And it's a lot of times they forget it's about usage optimization, usage efficiency, as well as carbon efficiency. And then bringing that back to not just what you're spending. I love JR has a statement that he often makes. FinOps is not about saving money. FinOps is about making money. I love that because it's just a reminder that this is all about driving that value. And cost is super important in that, but it's not the only factor that goes into that.
Yeah, and that's actually the question. It's super difficult that I get all the way from the top at Adobe is right to talk more about the value.
Yeah.
Right, and what's the value that we're creating? And as a software company that has we have web applications, we have desktop applications, right? Our desktop applications do not carry as much recurring costs with them as a lot of our cloud applications do. And so, like, what's the value of cloud, right? Like, that's money that the company could spend on a lot of other activities. We could use it to recruit more talent. We could use it for a marketing campaign. We could, do a lot of different things with that. And so I think Adobe's gotten to a point where we understand a lot better than we used to what that correlation is to cloud spend equating to value, right? Like we want to be excited about cloud spend going up because we know that that's customer value going up.
Yeah.
So, and then Rick, I think you had some thoughts on kind of other non-financial motivators.
Yeah, there's one that I've noticed that's worked really well in my partnership with my engineering teams, where we dedicate a certain amount of our engineering headcount to operational improvements, and that's things like, hey, we have on-call rotations, we have ops work that we automate build-outs of new regions and things like that. And it's actually interesting because the more time we devote to improving the operational success of our products, the less time in the long run our engineers have to spend taking on-call rotations, dealing with live production issues and outages and things like that. And engineers typically don't like on-call. Engineers typically don't like the ops work. They would rather be working on cool features that get shown on stages like this that people get excited about. And so the more we invest in operational effort and initiatives to automate and sort of get it taken care of, the more our engineers get to do fun stuff, building new things that, the new exciting thing that's going to help customers use more scalable services and things like that. So this is a great way to sort of entice engineers to spend more time building fun stuff, is to eat your vegetables, right? Do your ops work, automate your ops work, automate your deployments and your builds and your region builds for us. And that really allows them to spend more time thinking, hey, what's the next thing we can help customers optimize in our case, right? And that allows them to be more creative with, maybe they come to the product team with new ideas for optimizations, which as a PM, that's really exciting when you don't have to be accountable for coming up with every single new idea on what to optimize. So turning our engineers into product leaders as well by getting them to think about the problems we want to solve is a great outcome of getting this ops work kind of reduced on load.
Absolutely. I can echo that. I've seen across Adobe, there's a one-to-one correlation. Teams that are very good at cost efficiency are very good with reliability, right? Like they understand the inner workings of their systems very well, and I see that translate, that good understanding. So this has been fantastic. Unscripted, but any closing thoughts from anybody on the panel or anything else that's come up that you'd like to share?
I think I made this comment about value, and I was thinking about that as I was saying it. Fun times with ADHD. One of the things I think is interesting, and I don't hear about this much, but I think that's probably a bad thing. Is we all know here. I don't need to tell you how important measuring and quantifying value is. But in this shift left conversation, I'm just thinking how much of that conversation, yes, I've seen cost be part of that conversation. I've seen carbon be part of that conversation. Just general efficiency and optimization. Security, yeah, yes. But the one thing that I see just across the industry is the more mature organizations are shifting away from those things and talking more about the value. And I haven't fully internalized this, but just maybe what we should be seeing shift left is that value conversation, not precisely cost or carbon or usage optimization.
Yeah, if we do the work up front, right, and we get better about realizing, what is it that people actually need out of this? And my group particularly is pretty light on product management. I have to ask my engineering teams to step up and fill that gap. I've got a team of almost 400 people. I have one product manager, and they're over our what I would call our focus data lake. It's not focused yet, but that's generally where it's going.
We'll get you there.
Yeah. we could use the help. And so I've had to ask my engineering leads, right, my operations leads, to be thinking about, what are you building for who? Who's the benefiting organization? What do they want to see out of this? What's success look like for them? Because it's very easy to get locked into what I call sharpen the saw, right? We just end up doing all of these back-end efficiencies. We want it to be easier to operate. We want it to be easier to scale. We want it to be more reliable. Those are all important things. But I think the tough job of a really good product manager is first being aware of what all of those opportunities are, whether the security, customer features, back-end work that has to be done, and then with your good understanding of the customer and a little bit of your own vision of sometimes the customers don't know what they want, leading the groups forward. So I think, it's been a pleasure working with all of you and getting to learn a little bit more about how you think about product management and leading this and pulling this forward. If you haven't had a chance to read the kind of the shift left document that was pegged to this session, I'd recommend going in the app, open that link up. It's a really good read. And I know there's a feedback link at the bottom of that too if you've got feedback on it. So I would really recommend that you go through. It's an extension of what JR talked about this morning, and I'd highly recommend it. So with that, thank you so much for being here, panel. Appreciate it, and thanks for your time. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, producer Andrew here. I hope you enjoy this video as much as I enjoy sharing all of these amazing FinOps stories, best practices, and expertise. Please take a moment to like, subscribe, click the notification bell, and leave comments and questions for our speakers. Check out more FinOps X content on our YouTube channel. We appreciate the support.